Now we lost them. We're back. We're back. We good now?
I think so.
All right.
All right. Yep, we're good.
Solid. Okay. Persistence pays off, everybody. That was the fourth time that we got this, but we got it finally. So I want to thank Brian Gretkowski for being on the show today. Since I've done this now 4 times, what the hell? We'll give another intro to our guest, Brian Gretkowski, a dear friend of mine. We've been friends now for, I guess, approaching 4 years. That's when we, the fam, the Anderson clan, decided to move to Sparta, where the Gretkowskis have been for, I think, a little while longer.
Quite a while longer.
Ain't that right?
Yeah, I've been in Sparta for like 20 years.
But now, how about the current residents?
Only about 5. So we moved to this neighborhood like a year before you.
Okay. So wonderful neighborhood. Those of you that are not familiar with the Lake Mohawk community, it is a strong community, but specifically the Whippoorwill, Cardinal, and Sparrow section is a very strong knit community. A lot of families, a lot of excitement, a lot of kids. And Brian's an inspiration to me with 5 kids. Yes, 5 kids. That's my inspiration. I'm trying to keep pace with them, but we're going to stop at 4. The kitchen's closed now.
You're not far behind. You're not far behind, man.
Not going to end up with my starting 5, but that's okay. We're going to stick with 4. And then shout out to Brian's youngest, Ella. Happy first birthday today. Exciting times. But looks like they're going to be bunkering down here, because if you're not familiar with what's going on here in the Northeast, we got this storm coming up the coast. It's going to drop some blizzard-like conditions apparently over here. So we're bunkering down over here. But I'm sure the Gretkowskis will be having some fun over there at the residence.
We will. We will indeed, including a little fire, some birthday cake, you know.
There you go. Got the fire ripping in here. It's like 90 degrees in the
yeah,
right now. I overdo it often, but so as I was saying, probably the first 3 times we tried this was really the motivation behind pivoting for me personally with the people I was podcasting with, and specifically I was podcasting just by myself. From the start of 2021 all the way basically through July, August, basically before school started this past year, where I was really promoting the Stock Showdown. And that's, kind of, again, the business that I launched in 2021, which combines aspects of the stock market with competitive and fantasy sports. And you're trying to provide an entertaining and educational platform to get kids and adults, whoever, excited and interested about the stock market. So I know we've had conversations in the past, Brian, about this platform, and you yourself, have a good amount of interest and knowledge as it pertains to the stock market. But more in particular, I think your knowledge hails specifically into a very good asset class, and that would be the asset class of the real estate market. So like I do with all my entrepreneurial guests, which I started in October of 2021, that's where I kind of pivoted, is to get entrepreneurs on the show that can kind of tell their story of what was their epiphany, their aha moment of why they got into the business that they got into and why they do what they do. Basically, what's your why? So that's kind of how I start every show. So I'll turn it over to you, Brian. How'd you get into the real estate business? We'll start there, and we'll just let the conversation flow.
Sure. To go back in time, let's see, I grew up in New Jersey on the Jersey Shore, and really had, was kind of a late bloomer with what I was looking to do and accomplish in my, early 20s. Without much direction or like 100% certainty on where I wanted to go with my career track. My uncle lived in North Carolina, right around Raleigh, and he had a booming construction business, and gave me the opportunity to just say, hey, why don't you try a new location? There's a lot going on down there in the Research Triangle Park area. Come down, get yourself settled, and I'll just give you a job in order for you to get settled and in place before you decide what you want to do. So I actually worked with him for like 6 months on the construction sites. It was pretty fun. But then ran into the winter season, and I was like, man, I've really got to get inside. And you know, I started looking for what I called like a sales oriented position, and ended up becoming a leasing agent at a multifamily residential property in Raleigh. So that was my first position in the industry. Essentially, you know, being a leasing professional, showing people different apartment homes, and, you know, getting bonused every time you close a deal. So that was the incentive, was, you know, very sales oriented type of role. And then after a while, Will, I recognized that, you know, all facets of the business operations at this particular property were being done in-house. They weren't like outsourcing anything. So it kind of opened up my eyes to say, wow, well, this is like full suite business operations right here around real estate, and I really want to learn more. And that's what kind of, you know, started the trajectory in the career path.
Nice. So Research Triangle, that's exciting. A lot of great schools down in there.
Yeah, tons.
We got the Duke Blue Devils, UNC, NC State, Wake Forest.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where my passion, you know, I guess exudes. Is like, you know, with college basketball, and here it is, March Madness. I didn't mean to, like, you know, go off on a complete segue, but that's again why I created what I did, because of my interest in sports and just the parallels that I can find. But so now you're in North Carolina. What brought you, you know, what brought you back to the shore over here in Jersey?
Well, I was down there for like 2 years, and I was pretty young back then. My sister, my older sister, got pregnant, and I didn't want to be the long lost uncle. So I decided to move back home to Jersey. You know, I'm one of four, and it was time for me to come back, you know. So, but yeah, that was the start of my real estate career track. And, you know, I've always been on the operational side of the business. I went from, you know, leasing to kind of like an assistant manager role to becoming a property manager. And then after that, you know, kind of got into the more corporate type roles, which would be regional property manager, that kind of thing, where you're leading big teams of property management teams on site. So that's the career track. I've been in it for, you know, quite a while. Had worked for some, you know, national companies doing real estate operations for these, you know, large apartment communities, and then regional companies too, just, you know, properties from like Boston down to DC. And then at a certain point, I was like, wow, I've been doing this a long time. And I kind of saw a small gap in the market with regard to, you know, the smaller apartment communities that were, you know, being developed by smaller developers that couldn't afford larger institutional property management companies. So I decided to kind of fill that void in the market and launched Sparrow Asset Management December of 20, officially launched, you know, January of 21. So.
Nice. Okay. So for those of you that didn't catch the early part of the show here, our little community here in the Lake Mohawk area, we have Cardinal, Whippoorwill, and Sparrow. So I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, that's where the Sparrow hails from, yes?
Yes, dual inspiration, but yes, was perfect for us. So it's good.
Awesome. So that's great that you can, again, find that niche that just wasn't being addressed. And I think that's kind of, again, what good entrepreneurs, they can find and they can recognize is rather than trying to replicate what's already out there, which you can, there's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, it's a little bit more difficult with big players in the space, is trying to create that product differentiation and basically, again, try to take down the big boys that have the established space. But it sounds like, again, you found a niche that was untapped. Is there a ton of competition in this region within that particular space?
You know what? Well, there is competition that exists in this space, and what I'm talking about, just to give a little bit more detail around, you know, the scale of the buildings. The larger property management companies that I worked for had essentially, because of the fee structure, more or less created a minimum on the unit count. So say, for example, if you have an apartment building and it was, 200 units, 200 doors, right? You could afford the fee structure for that large institutional, national or even international property management company and pay them their 2 or 3% or whatever and meet their minimum fee structures on a monthly basis. However, when you've got a property building that's, say brand new, but only 80 units, now that owner, that developer can't really, it doesn't pencil out to pay the big boys to manage a smaller unit count. So I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh,
so
yeah.
that was really what I saw in the market was anything around 100, 150 units, 80 units for sure. They couldn't afford the large management fees. So having been on the business development side of trying to sell management services for the big companies in our state, I recognized, well, the smaller properties can't afford us. So where are they going? Who's actually filling that, need in the market? And the word on the street after I started turning over the stones was, there's people that do it, but they don't do it to the caliber of, the professional agencies. So I was like, wow, I've been on the professional agency side for 20 years. I know how to do this, and let me run after it and try to fill the void and do it, to a better caliber than some of the smaller groups were doing.
Now, so you have the big players, and like you said, you're talking like a limit of a minimum of 200, right?
Well, I'd say more or less like a minimum of 150 now, something like that.
All right. So now when you fill that void and that gap from 150 to less, do you have a minimum to where then your floor is reached where, again, it just doesn't make financial sense to take on a dwelling of a particular size?
Yeah, I mean, the good question. The smallest one we're doing right now is 16 units. And, I can't imagine we could do anything less than that. Ideally, it's more like 20 and above, 25 and above. We're doing a lot like 60 or so. It kind of seems like the sweet spot. Although, through some client relationships, we took down a building 176 units back in November of 21. So the big stuff will come. I think it's just a matter of people finding us and us doing what we do and kind of proving ourselves.
Awesome. So geographically, where is Sparrow Asset Management predominantly located? We talking here in New Jersey, or are you kind of spreading those wings and flying there, Mr. Gretkowski?
Well, we've established roots here. I've got an office space in Bloomfield, New Jersey, where one of our large clients are, so it kind of made sense for us. But yeah, we've got one commercial building that we're doing kind of as a favor for a client out in New York. I got a call the other day for property outside of Philly. So yeah, you never know. I mean, things could start expanding. It just has to make sense for us operationally, but primarily would love to stay in New Jersey for the most part.
Okay. All right. For now, right? For now.
For now. For now.
While the kids are young.
Yeah, exactly.
So now your expertise, and your experience stretching many decades has predominantly, at least from your working experience, been in the commercial real estate field.
Right.
Oh, my wife is watching.
There's
Hello,
my
my darling. We got the real Brian Gretkowski on finally.
I made
it. So your expertise, experience over many decades related specifically to commercial real estate. But that probably doesn't mean that you're not apt in the field of residential real estate as well.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So what are you involved in residential real estate? If you can divulge, and if so, when that began, and where you're at today.
Sure. I mean, so in regards to individual investment opportunities, I think, the cycle right now is obviously a little bit wonky. But, you start to be in this space for a while, you recognize the returns and the possibility. So I don't know, maybe about 4 years ago. I guess the first one was when Liz and I got married. We decided to keep our primary residence and use that as a rental. So kind of like, became landlords on that by default. Just decided to keep it, which was amazing. So we had that for a while. We also rented at the same time. Liz had a condo, and when we got married, she left the condo. I left my single family house. We ended up coming over here. We kept both of those and rented them out for quite some time, and that was awesome. We also got into a small multifamily property in Newton, New Jersey, and that's played out really nicely. That's 7 apartments and 1 retail store, and we're looking for the next one. So trying to build to the portfolio on that front. I think the next one might be something that we could use a little bit for like the family, and we might not be in the right cycle to do this, but looking at maybe some kind of Airbnb model like down in Florida or something that we could go to every once in a while when it's not being used, and kind of leverage the investment that way.
Now that that has blown up. The idea of Airbnb, genius business model. And it's always like those ideas, like, why didn't I think?
Yeah,
I mean, you could rent out anything, like a houseboat, whatever.
They're doing cars now. There's all these apps that you could, lease out your car for the day, your own personal car, like give it to someone else for a day. It's pretty wild.
Jeez, I got a bike. Anybody want to borrow a bike?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I mean, my Peloton bike. You could rent my Peloton bike. I'll put it out in the I'll put it out in the garage.
Yeah. So true.
So now the opportunities though that are out there, at least right now, like you said, it's kind of wonky, lunky, whatever the word was that you used. Is now the opportune time to make a move, or I mean, are there pockets across the country where those opportunities exist, or is it more opportune to kind of just sit on cash for the time being? I mean, I hate saying sit on cash because you put in a bank savings account and you're getting pennies on the dollar. Right. Not only that, you're not outpacing inflation, which is running rapid at 7.9%. The last month's figure reported. So it's kind of like you have to put it to work to just compete with inflation. But at the same time, with rates on the rise, as the Fed has forecasted they're going to do, has kind of then accelerated people to jump in now before rates continue to move higher. So what is your advice? What is your suggestion in a time like that?
Yeah, I mean, generally my guidance right now would be to wait. Even as a regular, like I'm working with someone now who's trying to get into her first single family house. She's getting married this summer. They're looking, it's super deflating. There's just so much demand, and that's what's kept Liz and I out of our next single family investment property. Is just the cycle is wrong, for there to be kind of better long-term potential. So my position right now is, as an investor, is to wait for that kind of next, and it might be a while out before there's, a good level of correction. As you mentioned, there's going to be interest rate hikes, and that might settle things down. But I think it's going to take a while. I mean, historically, my understanding on the single family cycles, it's about 8 or 9 years. If you look, back the last 80 or 100 years on single family, whether demand, and then it kind of drops down. So that tends to run every 8 or 9 years if you look at the history. So if you consider peak maybe was last summer, summer of 20, I would propose that, we're still a couple years away from, the reset to happen where it's a good entry point.
Oh, good. I have time then for more appreciation, perhaps.
Exactly. Save your acorns.
Because again, it's very easy, I guess, to see, this one's getting, this one's getting rich doing this one's getting rich doing this one's buying this property and this property
Right.
and this property, and like, that's very easy, and we post it all over social media of all these, these kids, not kids, but people getting wealthy quick. But it reminds me almost, and I know that things are so different as far as leverage in the financial system than it was in 2000, the mid 2000s. I know with Dodd-Frank and all the regulation is kind of put a cap onto the amount of leverage. So I know that this situation is far different, but it still worries me because of, you and I, we lived through that. So we saw that happen. And I was working in banking when it imploded, and was working for a bank that was making these insane mortgage products and giving them out to people that didn't belong to have them.
Right.
Do you see any of that I mean, like, I've been so out of that game for quite some time. Do you see that in what you do, that perhaps these people that are not supposed to be getting these loans are getting these loans and overextending? Do you see any sort of enhanced leverage in the system like we did about a decade ago or so? Or is it, again, vastly different this time?
I think it's vastly different, honestly. On the larger scale, the commercial real estate lending parameters of, they're 25, 30%, where it tends to kind of make sense and mitigate some of the risk for the lender side. On the single family side, right after the pandemic happened, I think a lot of the large institutions did start to employ policy internally where they were trying to mitigate their own risk. Whether that's limiting HELOCs and like line of credit on, single family houses, because they understood like people were losing their jobs, people were, not able to work, and they have learned a lot, right? Like through the downswings over the years, and especially like in 08, if you look back and whatnot. I think they put some hedges around to protect themselves this time. So that's my take on it.
So you mentioned commercial real estate, and with the pandemic, I want to get your take on this one. With more and more institutions and companies realizing that remote work is the way to go, or the future in some shape or form for some companies. What do you see happening with a lot of these urban areas, city areas that are heavy in commercial real estate, that those buildings might not need all that occupied space anymore? What do you see happening in the commercial real estate market in some of those pockets?
Yeah, it's vastly different, right? And I'm not sure that we will see the full effect of this new kind of work from home set up just yet, because you got to remember a lot of the leases on the big office spaces, they're long, and you got a lot of landlords that are willing to do what they need to do to kind of get through with their cash flow needs. But some of those spaces, the larger leases, they're still paying their rent, even though they don't need the space. They're locked in. They've got like a 10-15 year lease, and what are you going to do, right?
Yeah.
You're stuck. People are, I think what became popular is, through the pandemic, is allowing people a lot more flexibility. The bottom line is families have just gotten used to it, right? Like Liz was working part-time. She used to go into the city once a week, and she hasn't been there since March of 20. It hasn't ever came back, nor will it, right? Like they recognize the benefits of, okay, this is just a big waste of time to travel to Manhattan and back.
Yeah,
like,
right.
I'm more productive being in front of my laptop, taking phone calls, doing business. So anyway, with all that being said, I think the bottom line is we probably won't see the ripple effects for quite some time as some of these leases start to drop off, meaning the leases expire and then the renter truly makes a downsize in space, and that's going to happen. It's going to happen. They just don't need the same amount of space, footprint as they did before, when everyone was, Monday through Friday.
Interesting. I didn't know, and that's great insight, because not a novice like me would anticipate, some of these commercial buildings that are going to go vacant, it's going to happen. I mean, maybe they are vacant, but as far as the lease, it's not going to expire for a decade or so. I mean, so you're not going to see this potential implosion for a decade or so.
Yeah, I would imagine it's going to start, 5 years or so. All the leases are just in cycles,
Oof. So. All right. Well, there's going to be opportunity then.
There will be opportunity for sure.
That's why cash could be king.
No doubt about it.
All right. I mean, again, thank you for your time here, Brian. It was a pleasure having you on the show. Valuable insight and education. As I said before, if my audience doesn't know, high school business teacher, trying to get entrepreneurs of all walks of life on the show to educate my primary audience, which I look to see as my high school students. So final question I usually ask all my guests, Brian, is what kind of advice can you give to high schoolers growing up in this day and age? And if I'm not mistaken, you got one on the cusp who's, I think, a 6th grader, and maybe one also on the cusp as an 8th grader, perhaps?
No, Lily's in 9th grade now.
Oh, there you go. So high schoolers. So
yeah, exactly.
Maybe you're having these talks or talks similar to this, but what kind of advice can you give to high schoolers growing up in this day and age? And that's really, again, a loaded question, so I'll let you take it any angle you want there, Brian.
Sure. I think first and foremost, just from my own personal experiences, don't create, inner turmoil with regard to like your future. I used to worry like in my early 20s, not knowing 100% what I wanted to commit my career track to. And the bottom line is it plays out, and it's going to maneuver and change, especially in the climate that we're in now. Like, our parents obviously lived in a different, career mindset where you lock into one company and you're there for your 30 years and then you're out.
Right.
Now there's so much maneuverability in the marketplace, and you can really advance your career by being open to, other opportunities with different companies. And that's just kind of the way the world spins now. So number one, I would say is, don't be anxious about the future. Try to be, present minded about what you want to do with your future, and take it one step at a time. Kind of like that walk slow mentality, right? Like you're not going to gain any immediate traction by worry. You're better served just taking your time and really contemplating your moves in your career, and always have a mentor. And that's one thing that is just really important for adolescents is, you want to talk to someone 10 years and 20 years older than you that have gone through these cycles already, and, tap into their knowledge. Because when you're 20 and you're talking to a 30-year-old, there's so much knowledge to gain. So that's kind of my guidance and my assessment on it. The last thing is, you got to take care of yourself when you're, I know when I was 20, I was running as hard as I could in my career track, and you kind of neglect some other areas of your life, and that's a mistake. You got to be well-rounded, take care of the full wheel of life, if you will. So
couldn't have said it better myself. Amen, my brother. So yes, take care of yourself, follow your career path. Everything will find its way the way it's supposed to be. The cards will settle the way they're supposed to be. So fantastic advice and insight, and get that mentor. Again, another great piece of advice. And my wife, Courtney, she, encouraged me to do that when I was starting my business. Have a wonderful mentor, James Fletcher. Shout out to my boy, James Fletcher. Hopefully you can see this, who's been there, done that. So again, you want to find people that have been through that course that you're trying to follow that can give you that insight. So, Brian Gretkowski, fantastic guest. Happy birthday again to his daughter, Ella. Hope you guys enjoy. This is Wandy, your host, and Brian Gretkowski signing off. God bless everybody. Thank you for joining.